The theme that I have selected for this series of meetings this week is Christian, from the cradle to the grave. And the idea behind that is thinking very early in our lives and the lives of our children about this spiritual journey that we are all to be on to go to heaven, and the various steps along the way in that process. And each lesson that I intend to present will be geared toward that theme, from start to finish, Christian. The one this morning has to do with our children and getting off on the right foot in their rearing and in parenting. It's hard to take a journey or make a trek when you're dealing with an immediate crisis. I think about a time when I was in the middle of a lake in a boat with my brother-in-law, and the engine quit. And I thought, it was getting close to dark, we need to get to the shore. And so we began to think about how that might happen, but before we could figure out that, a torrential downpour came. And so I noticed very quickly that flat bottom boat was filling up with water. And I thought, we need to make it to shore, but there was an immediate crisis. We had to keep the boat from filling up with water. And so there I was with my brother-in-law in the middle of the lake before the availability of cell phones and that technology, with 2 coffee cans, trying to dish the water out of the boat as fast as it was filling up. That story ended well. It quit raining, and we got it towed to shore. But getting to the shore, that goal was interrupted by an immediate crisis, just staying afloat. And in my mind, that kind of resembles the situation where we are in parenting in the church. We have a mind to get our children to the shores of eternity, but we have some immediate crisis on the forefront that in many respects are being neglected and not being considered. And so this morning in this Bible class hour, I want to suggest some things, especially to parents, but indirectly to grandparents as well, who have an instrumental role in the rearing of their grandchildren, in hopes that we can develop a mentality of what we'll just call proactive parenting and break a bad cycle of having children, waiting too long to get busy about their spiritual direction, and then realizing often too late that we've missed opportunities to help steer them in the right direction. We in the church need to break that cycle because it's a bad one. The statistics are alarming with respect to the number of our children that are leaving the church. So we need to break that. And so this morning I'm hopeful to help us think along those lines and maybe say something and provide some insight that would be helpful. Now, the principle of Proverbs 22 verse 6, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old they will not depart from it, makes parenting sound like a breeze. Very early in my life as a Christian, I was given the opportunity by a certain preacher to write a bulletin article. And I chose to write about this particular passage. I was a very young, inexperienced Christian at the time, and the slant that I took on that passage was met with immediate resistance. I basically said, if you train the child correctly, then it will stick. I've learned through life that may not always be the case. That's a principle. In principle, generally speaking, the proper rearing of children in training them in the way that they should go, in principle, it will stick. Sometimes it doesn't. And we may look at a situation where a child has gone off and say, well, the parents failed their responsibility or duty. That's not always the case. God has given all of us free moral agency, the ability to choose and to will our own lives, whether we will pursue His will or our own. And oftentimes children, even under the best parental tutelage, choose to go another direction. Parenting is not a breeze. It's not something to be entered into lightheartedly or flippantly. It's a very serious and sobering responsibility. And if you have children or you have reared children, you know that to be the case. It has to be the most challenging job in the world because of the weight of it and the consequences of not doing a good job at it. But at the same time, it's the most important job and the most rewarding opportunity and privilege that we have as Christians, as Christian parents. The opportunity and privilege to rear children in the way that they should go. We need hands-on, active, even proactive parenting in order to get the job done. Not reactive. We can't sit back and wait for things to happen or situations to develop in parenting and then determine or decide how we're going to deal with them. We need to be thinking one step ahead as parents. Looking at the world around us in relation to the age of our children and saying, okay, what are the next things that I'm going to have to deal with, or I'm going to have to confront as a parent, and try to the very best that we can to prepare for this most important matter. I have 3 points or 3 areas of this idea of proactive parenting that I would like to present for our consideration this morning. Here's the first one. We must wake up to the reality that time is not on our side in parenting. When they're born, we're there in the hospital room holding them for the first time. We may look at them and think, oh, they're so young, and we have a lot of time to steer and direct and to guide them. But that time is fleeting already when they enter into this world. You don't even need a Bible to get that particular point. You can just look at the world around you and see how quickly time passes. I think about my 5 years at the Roanoke Church of Christ, where I preach presently. There are children who were unborn when I arrived there that are 5 years old already. There are young kids who are already teenagers. There are teenagers that have already gone off to college or have even married. Just life and just our experience in it demonstrates to us, if we will open our eyes and look, that time is fleeting. And time is not on our side with respect to parenting. The Bible does caution us against counting on time and opportunity. You think about James chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, where James wrote, "Come now, you who say today and tomorrow we will go into such a city, and we will spend a year there, buy and sell and get gain. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." Think about vapor for a moment. Vapor is not like smoke. You build a fire in the fireplace or the backyard, smoke will billow from that, and it will continue and accumulate, or it will go with the air and the wind that blows, and that smoke will continue into a distance and you can watch it. A vapor, however, think about a pot on the stove and perhaps water boiling. And you see what looks like smoke come up from the pot, but it's not smoke. It doesn't linger. It rises up and then it dissipates into the air. James didn't say your life is like smoke. It carries with the wind and continues. Your life is like a vapor. It appears for a little time and then vanishes away. And I would suggest to us this morning, with respect to parenting, that from the time that they are born to the time that they launch out on their own, it's a vapor. It really is. Yes, in time it's 18, 20 years, but in reality it is a vapor, because before it even gets started good, they're off on their own. Time is not on our side. Jesus said in John chapter 9 and verse 4, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. Jesus demonstrated through his very own life that time is fleeting, and you have to use opportunity right now while you have it to do the good that God intends for you to do. You might be a parent of very young children. Maybe you have a newborn. Maybe you have 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 5-year-old. Maybe they're a preteen. And you may feel comfortable right now that you have sufficient time remaining to be of influence, all the influence that you need to be in their life. You may feel very comfortable right now, but I'm telling you, if that's how you feel, you're already behind. In reality, we all, as parents, to feel like we are behind, and we need to work diligently in the time that we have remaining. I'm telling you, you just don't have that much time left. It seems like just yesterday that my oldest daughter left for Freed-Hardeman College. She will graduate this December. Not only that, but this December she is planning to get married. And it just seems like yesterday that my wife and I and Glenn and Mercedes had little baby girls, and we were beginning our experiment at parenting. They survived it, but it just seems like yesterday. Time is fleeting, and if you feel comfortable right now with the time that you have remaining, I'm warning you that you're already behind with respect to the time that you have. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 through 9, Moses wrote these words, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. What do you think Moses was onto when he spoke these inspired words? What opportunities did he suggest that were important opportunities and times for us to teach our children? I get from that, on his mind was the need to do it all the time. In every place and in every opportunity that you were afforded, capitalize on that time and those opportunities to teach your children. Too often, brethren, it's the case that we neglect those early formative years thinking we have plenty of time, and we miss valuable opportunities. In one town, in a daycare, you may have seen this. It was, as they say, viral on the internet. It was posted on all the social media outlets. One daycare in a small Texas town put a sign on the door to the parents. And it said, You are picking up your child. And then in big letters it said, get off your phone. Your child is happy to see you. Are you happy to see your child? We have seen children trying to hand their parents their work they completed, and the parent is on the phone. We have heard a child say, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and the parent is paying more attention to their phone than their own child. It goes on to say, it is appalling. And then again in big letters, get off your phone. I don't know what you might be distracted by as a parent this morning, but distractions come very easily. Technology is a big one. And that's one area where we have to be careful. But in every area of life that would distract us from the immediate urgency of having the mindset of taking that young child and getting them to the shores of eternity, we cannot afford to be distracted. Satan's going to put a lot of things before us to get us to think that we have plenty of time. But time is like a vapor. It appears for a little time and then it vanishes away. And so, in the first place this morning, unless we are proactively taking advantage of time, you know what will happen? Time will take advantage of us. And before you know it, that little baby will be going off to college. Or that little baby girl will be saying, "Mama, Daddy, I'm ready to get married," and to move away. And all that they will have at that moment as a spiritual advantage for them will be what they have gleaned from you and me as proactive parents, taking time to use our time wisely to rear them in the way that they should go. My caution first this morning, as we think about proactive parenting, is to wake up to the reality time is not on your side. Secondly, if we're going to proactively parent, we need to build a proper foundation and teach our children to maintain it. The maintenance aspect of that is just as important. I live in a community right now that's a growing community. It's an area where I live in the downtown area of Roanoke, and there are a lot of older homes that people are coming in and knocking down and then building a newer home on it. I mean, they're coming in and buying lots that are less than a quarter of an acre. And they're spending a couple of $100,000 on that lot, tearing the house down and then building a $400,000 or $500,000 home on that lot. And I was watching out in my office right now, is in my home, and it faces the street. And I was watching out the window, a lot sold catty corner to our place there just recently, and there was a house on it. And the day after the for sale sign was removed, a couple of bulldozers and a dump truck came in. And in 2 days, they had leveled that lot, removed the house, everything that was on there. They had removed it in 2 days. That work of destroying that home and that lot was relatively short. But on the opposite side of the street, where there has been a lot cleared, a building project was begun. And I watched over the course of several days as dump trucks or concrete trucks came in and poured concrete into the foundation mold. That wasn't a 2-day job. It was several days, and just dump truck or concrete truck after concrete truck coming in and pouring that concrete that had been prepared to build a foundation there in that place. The land where we live and our community has a lot of clay that will dry up and separate. And so you have to be very cautious about the foundation to make sure that you pour one that will last and that will endure the kind of ground that it will be subjected to, the shifting and things of that nature. Much work goes into preparing the foundation on which a house is going to be built. I would suggest to us this morning that it is even more important that we lay a foundation. Not just tell our children, well, this is what we believe and this is what we do and that's just the way we do it and we expect you to do it. But to lay a foundation and to teach them about it and to help them maintain it. So if we're going to lay that kind of foundation, what kind of ingredients? And I don't know a lot about concrete, but I know it's not just the process of taking some of the concrete mixture and how much ever water you want to put in there and just stirring it up. There is a process that varies based upon the kind of foundation that is going to be needed. There are ingredients that have to be considered. Well, in parenting, if we're going to lay a proper foundation, what kind of ingredients do we need to pour into the mixture? I could give an exhaustive list this morning in the time that we have. I don't know. Experience teaches you a lot, and we all have different experiences, and some of the things that you might suggest this morning may be different than even the ones that I have thought of. But I have thought of a few ingredients that seem to me would help make a sure foundation for our children. So here they are. The first one is a genuine love and devotion for God and to God. Not just something superficial, not just something that is acted out in our lives and has no real substance or meaning, but a genuine love and devotion to God and for God. In Mark chapter 12, verse 33, Jesus, speaking of the admonition that we've just read in Deuteronomy chapter 6, says that this love for God that we are to have is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. It must begin with a genuine love and devotion for God. And if I'm going to help my children establish a proper foundation, that's where I need to begin. They'll either love God or they'll leave God. And that will be determined in large measure by what you and I do in rearing them and pouring that foundation. Do they see in us a genuine love and adoration for the God of heaven? Or do they see something that has no real substance to it? A genuine love and devotion for God is first. Number two, respect for authority. As we mix the foundation and prepare something that will be stable, that will sustain them, we need to add in respect for authority. You know, the original human sin in the Garden of Eden amounted to an unwillingness to submit to the authority of God. Satan had already determined that's the course he was going to pursue, but he invited the first couple to do the same thing. God had spoken. God had given clear, specific instruction about what man could do and what he couldn't do in the Garden of Eden. It was clear. And the authority of God was demonstrated in that instruction. But Satan invited Adam and Eve to disregard that authority. We live in a world today that invites young boys and girls, men and women, to disrespect authority. If we're going to pour a proper foundation for our children, we need to teach them to respect true authority, and primarily the authority of God in His Word. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 20, Paul said, "Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord." Children need to begin with an understanding and an appreciation that their parents are the authority. And that authority is derived from the God of heaven. And in order to please God, they must obey their parents. And the better they understand and appreciate that authority in the home, the better they will understand and appreciate the authority that God has over them in their lives, even after they leave their parents' home. But if we allow them to disrespect authority, if we allow them to disrespect us and to walk all over us as parents or other adults that are in positions of control over them, whether that be in the school system, whether it be interaction with governmental officials and those who are appointed to represent authority in the land where we live, if we teach them that it's okay to disrespect those authorities, then it's just dominoes from there. It all falls apart. Because then they don't respect God and His authority either. So we need a genuine love and devotion for God. We need respect for authority. But thirdly, another ingredient that seems so essential and so important is this: personal responsibility and ownership. To accept personal responsibility for their own actions and to take ownership of their own wrongs. We live in a society today that when someone does something wrong, they immediately begin to look for someone else to blame for it. It's somebody else's fault. Someone somewhere did something that put me in the situation to make the decision that I made. It can't be my fault. No, we need to teach personal responsibility and ownership. In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7, Paul said, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap." We will reap what we sow. And so we need to take personal responsibility for our actions. And we need to teach our children to be responsible for themselves. And when they do wrong, to own it, not to blame someone else. You know what happens when we fail to take ownership? When we fail to take personal responsibility, we remove the need to repent and correct our actions. However, if we own it, if we assume responsibility for our actions, and it's our fault when we mess up or we do wrong, then we're in a position to say, I did wrong. I did wrong. And I need to repent. The world out there says it's someone else's fault. If you and I allow our children to grow up in an environment where we can just blame someone else, then we'll never take ownership. They'll never take ownership. And there will never be any true repentance and change in our lives and their lives. In Ezekiel 18:20, Ezekiel wrote these words: "The soul that sins, it shall die." He goes on to say that the son will not inherit the sins of the father. The father is not responsible for the sins of the son. The righteousness of the righteous is upon him. The wickedness of the wicked is upon him. We are all individually responsible for our lives and the direction of them. And we don't want our children to say, well, I failed. I went the wrong direction because of you. No, we're going to teach them to be responsible and to take ownership of their own lives. And maybe at the end of their lives, they go off in another direction other than the one we intended for them to go. And we say, well, I told them those things. But, telling it and demonstrating it are two different things entirely. If you tell someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, you do more harm than good. Because you show them, and I show them by my very life and your very life, that you really don't believe it. Telling them it's not enough. The question we ought to ask ourselves is, have we lived the things that we're telling them? Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4 records where Paul said, "You fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." Bring them. You know, the unique thing about bringing something is you have to accompany it. You could throw something to me and stay right where you're at. But if you're going to bring it, you have to get up and you have to bring it. If we're going to bring our children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, then we have to be accompanying them in that same direction and instruction of godliness. Titus chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, Paul told Titus to show himself a pattern of good works. We're to show ourselves a pattern of the very thing that we're trying to instill in our children. If we want them to have a genuine love and devotion and respect for God, then we better have it as parents. If we want them to respect authority, then they must see us submitting to and respecting authority. If we want them to be personally responsible and to be owners of their own actions, they must and they better see that in us. A sure destroyer of a child's foundation is hypocrisy in the lives of their parents. If you want to see the foundation cracked right down the middle, be a hypocrite as a parent. You know, Matthew chapter 7 and verse 5, where Jesus called the Jews of his day hypocrites. They were quick at identifying the wrong in the lives of others. They couldn't see it in themselves. They were quick to give instruction and direction that they weren't willing to follow themselves. Can't you just see and picture and envision the damage that would cause in the life of a child to hear instruction and to hear demands of them from parents who don't practice and do the very things? I mean, you've experienced hypocrisy in your life. You must surely have had incidents and seen situations where you were told something to do by people who didn't do. They didn't practice the message that they preached. And you know how frustrating that is? You're telling me to do this, you're requiring this of me, but you don't even do it. Think about a child, that impressionable mind, seeing that. Many foundations in the hearts and minds of children are cracked and destroyed, not because the instruction wasn't good, not because the parents didn't tell them it's important to submit to authority, not because the words and the message and the guidance was bad, but just simply because the ones giving it didn't believe it enough to practice it themselves. Don't be a hypocrite as a parent. Embody and live the very things that you are telling your children that God expects of them and that you expect of them. Build a proper foundation and teach children to maintain it. Oh, time is fleeting, right? It's like a vapor. I remember when the reality hit me that Kaylin, my oldest daughter, was about to go off to college. I thought that I had gotten the jump on this, you know, and that I had been working real hard to prepare her for that new environment. But I realized quickly there were a lot of things that she didn't yet know, like how to change a tire. Change the oil in your car regularly. Don't wait till it stops on the side of the road. And those are just some of the material things, but just think about the sudden reality that your child is about to go off into a new world, a new environment. Have you prepared them spiritually? Have you lived and modeled for them the very things that you want to see in their life, because that's what God wants to see? Have you laid a proper foundation? Time is fleeting. Thirdly, and very quickly, in proactive parenting, we need to understand that discipline is essential, but it should be corrective, not corrosive. Fear makes us look at things backwards. Now, we think if we discipline our children, we may run them off, or we may turn them off, and sometimes we'll let up when it's needed, because the world has taught us that if you discipline a child, that will have negative consequences and effects. But Proverbs 23, verse 13, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24, teaches us that the importance of discipline and applying correction when it's needed and necessary. Don't let the world scare you away from applying discipline to your parenting. But irrational discipline is corrosive. It's not helpful. We can't be irrational in the way that we discipline our children. Colossians chapter 3, verse 21, fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 18 says, chasten your son while there is hope, and do not set your heart on his destruction. Discipline should not be destructive or intended to hurt or harm. It should always be viewed as corrective, because that's the way it's intended by God. I saw this statement recently in preparing for this lesson. It was about good kids. It said, don't let yourself become so concerned with raising a good kid that you forget you already have one. Sometimes we can be too hard on our children, not realizing that they are basically good. They just need corrective guidance, not destructive and corrosive discipline. One of the great dangers in disciplining our children is division or disharmony among the parents with respect to how to discipline. You have to be on the same page. You have to be in agreement. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 11 and 12 talks about the threefold cord and the strength of it. I would say God, the Father, the Mother, and God, all in harmony working together in the discipline process, will be helpful. Anything short of that, if the parents are demonstrating that they don't agree in front of the child in the disciplinary measures that are being taken place, they'll not have the right effect. It will be corrosive. So you need to talk now as parents about how you're going to handle discipline, how you're going to handle the disagreements about it. Not in front of the child, but so you can present a united front with respect to disciplining them and bringing them up in the Lord. And then finally, with regard to discipline, don't enable your children. You know, an electrical cord is only so long. And if you pull it beyond what it was intended to be stretched, it will come unplugged. And you lose the source that was supplied by that cord. We can enable our children to go further and further and further away from God if we're not careful. Luke 15, the prodigal son, the father let him go. He didn't chase him down or just supply more extension cord for his life. He let him go. Don't enable your children. In closing, finally, I would just say that parenting is a stewardship. Time is short. The consequences are eternal. Use your time wisely. Be a proactive parent. Wake up to the reality that time is not on your side. Build a proper foundation and teach children to maintain it. And then discipline is essential. And it's profitable if it's used wisely in a way to correct and not corrode. I hope that I've said something this morning to parents and grandparents that will be helpful in breaking a bad cycle of losing children in the church. We do that with proactive parenting. May God help us to do just that. Thank you very much for your kind attention.